Christiana was a greatly valued colleague of mine during my 8 years leading the United Nations Development Programme. Our paths crossed a lot. UNDP had a sizable climate action portfolio which addressed both adaptation and mitigation issues, and Christiana was the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. I attended the annual conference of parties to the convention every year in those 8 years, and also many other climate policy related events. Christiana was then, and she is now, a globally recognised leader for action to halt global warming and to build support for developing countries, both to pursue climate-friendly development pathways and to adapt to the already warmer climate, which has brought so many more frequent and intense adverse climate events. When I look back on those years, it's clear to me that my job was the easy one. It fell to Christiana to help shepherd the negotiating process for a new and ambitious climate deal after the wreckage of the failed Copenhagen Conference of Parties in 2009. 2 years before that, in Bali, a roadmap had been agreed which should have led to a new binding climate deal in Copenhagen. That proved to be impossible. The talks collapsed, and in subsequent years, many small steps had to be taken to get the negotiating process back on a track which would lead to agreement. Then, in 2015, assisted by the extraordinary diplomacy and outreach of France, the near impossible happened. A landmark deal was reached in Paris in December 2015. Of course, since then, the road to implementation has been rocky, and most countries, frankly, are taking far too long to lift their level of ambition on climate action. But good news has come in the form of a change of administration in the United States, which will see it come back on board with the Paris Agreement. And that will be so helpful in getting back the badly needed global momentum for climate action and reaching the goals of the Paris Agreement. Of course, here in New Zealand, we have to play our part too. Our need to act can't be dismissed, as one does here from time to time, as unnecessary just because we represent a tiny proportion of global greenhouse gas emissions. The fact is that on a per capita basis, we are a very high emitter, the fifth highest in the OECD and the 21st highest in the world, according to figures published in 2018. On that basis, it's not really surprising that New Zealand wasn't invited to the major event being held today, hosted by the UN, France and the UK, to mark the fifth anniversary of the Paris Agreement. We will have to earn our place. Again, there is good news in that the government has been putting in place the policies and mechanisms which can address the challenges and has worked to get wider buy-in for them across the political spectrum. Our past efforts have suffered from a stop-go political cycle, and it is only long-term consistent work in the same direction which is going to enable New Zealand to reach its zero carbon ambition and play its full role under the Paris Agreement. As every country now contemplates its pathway to economic and social recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, each has the opportunity to reset its policy frameworks for greater inclusivity, resilience and sustainability. And that reset has to include accelerated climate action. Stopping catastrophic global warming remains one of the greatest challenges our world faces, and that is recognised in the government's recent declaration of a climate emergency. Christiana Figueres has a huge amount to say on all these issues, and by selecting her as this year's Hillary Laureate, the Hillary Institute is recognising her extraordinary work over decades to promote climate action. And it's also recognising the great significance of the climate challenge. So plaudits are due both to Christiana as the laureate and to the Hillary Institute for the selection. In closing, it falls to me, I understand, formally to introduce the 2020 Hillary Laureate, Christiana Figueres, and wish you all a very wonderful evening in Christchurch. Thank you and kia kaha.